Kia ora. I hope the stories are going well, the writing's coming well, and the workshopping's coming along. Um, I saw a few questions recently about the Re-Envisioned story, and it's probably time that we all turn our attention toward that. So in this little video, I'd just like to talk to you about the Re-Envisioned story. And I want to answer two questions. First of all, what does that mean? What is a Re-Envisioned story? And the second question, how do I decide whether or not to write a new story, since I see that's a possibility, or to reimagine or re-envision one of my former stories? Good questions, both of them. So, first of all, what do I mean when I say re-envisioned story? Because it's kind of the strange phrase. It suggests more than a revised story, but how much more does it suggest? What is it? So, briefly, in answering that, I just like to sort of identify what I see as four stages in the revision process. A lot of times I think students sort of conflate these stages or don't sort of see one stage as being much higher than the other. So basically I see these stages as this. The very bottom is proofreading. It's something that we do all the time, right? It's something that we do for our emails, our grocery lists maybe. I mean, we always proofread. And that's not revision, that's not re-envisioning. The second level up is editing, and editing includes things like making sure the tense is right, spelling, changing the end of a sentence, double checking some research. Do I have that setting correctly? Is the spacing here right? Should I put a section break here? Should I not? Those are sort of editing level concerns. So we're not up yet to revision or re-envisioning. Then there's what I call revision. And many students actually they just get to editing and they don't actually get to the revision stage. So revision can include quite significant changes. You write out a small character, you change the point of view, you alter the ending of the story. These things are all sort of on the level of revision. So what's re-envisioning then? Well, I see re-envisioning as the next level up. So re-envisioning is kind of what I call, and I'll put this in quotes, blank page revision, in that you're sort of opening a new page, a new document, and sort of starting from scratch, but not exactly. I mean, you might want to go back and say, okay, well, I really enjoy this character. This character is definitely working. I love their voice. So I'm going to just sort of transfer over this section or this passage, and I know I'm going to keep that. I know what the emotional center of the story is, so that's changing. I might change the main character. I'm certainly going to change the ending. I don't necessarily know how it's going to end, but I know what it's about. You might say, well, I really like this setting. I really like the setting, and I just thought that second person point of view was quite interesting, so I'm going to continue to go with that, but it might be about a different emotional center. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about re-envisioning. I'm talking about really holistically reimagining your story. It might not be completely new. It might turn out to be new, and that's why I want that flexibility in there. You might turn out to write a very similar version of the story, but one that maybe is much more moving, or the language is much more affecting, but the emotional centers may be more developed, but the characters are the same. Or you might turn out to write something that's fairly new that you hadn't expected at all. So that's what I mean by a re-envisioned story. Now, how do you decide whether to re-envision one of your first stories or to write something new? And I guess the first thing I would say, and this is not maybe too helpful, but is the difference might not be that clear. I mean, I kind of think of it like this. You know, during any sort of 6-month, even 1 year, 2-year period, you're sort of drawing on the same kind of emotional reservoir to write a story. And so even if you set out to write a new story, you might end up writing a version of what you wrote before without even intending to. So maybe the line between writing a new story and revising the story, re-envisioning the story, might not be crystal clear. But I will try to answer that question, not just worm my way out of it too. So how do I decide whether or not to write a new story? Well, I think you can use, as I mentioned in a posting before, you can use your grade as one indicator. So if you have an A plus or an A, you're not allowed to re-envision, basically, because there's nothing much to re-envision. Your story's pretty close to being complete. So if you have an A or an A plus, then you're not going to re-envision that story. You're going to write something new. Or you're going to go to the other story that you didn't get an A or an A plus on. Conversely, on the other side of the scale, generally speaking, if you're getting a C minus or a C, it means that while this material might have some potential for re-envisioning, most material does, it might be a lot of time and trouble and effort, and you might want to put your energy into something that is new, something that maybe matters to you a little bit more. So that's a rough way to use your grades as an indicator. Of course, the other indicators are things like your own personal interest. If you maybe got a C on a story, but you absolutely love it and you know it's important and you know it's the story that you need to tell, then maybe you do want to re-envision it anyway. Conversely, if you got a B on a story, which according to that little grade chart says that it might not be it might be an excellent contender for re-envisioning. If you got a B and you think, yeah, I'm done with that material, I'm done with that story, I have nothing more to say there, then you don't want to re-envision that. So you put the grade together with your own interests, and finally with the comments from your tutor and from your workshop group. If your tutor is very excited about the story and really sees a lot of potential and gives you some great ideas, if workshop suggestions give you some fantastic ideas, and when you were in workshop you felt really invigorated about returning to that story, then that's a really good sign. You probably do want to return to that story. So basically you put all those things together and you think about it and you reflect. What I would use as a sort of gauge is this: do I really want to reimagine that story, or do I really want to write something new? What do I feel drawn to? Where's my interest lie? Because your interest is going to be what motivates you and fuels you. And if you're ultimately bored by a story or by the prospect of re-envisioning it, probably we will be too. So what do you love? What do you need to do again? And those are sort of the questions that guide you. I hope this was useful in trying to get you a little bit closer to imagining a re-envisioned story, or what you might re-envision for your final story. If you have any questions and comments, as always, you can post those on the general questions and discussion forum. And I'll check in again too before the end of the course. Happy writing.